What is up, YouTube? My name is Evan, and today we're going to be talking on the edge about Eeveelutions. Well, okay, technically this isn't necessarily about the new Eeveelutions in a way, it's really about the things they enable. Of course, Vespiquen is a very popular Eeveelution card in terms of what they can support, but we're not going to talk about Vespiquen today. Mainly because the edge is about talking about new and different things and unusual things, and trying to play the game in creative ways. And so we're not going to be talking necessarily about the most typical uses. For those of you who aren't acquainted, each of these Eeveelutions has 90 HP, which makes them compatible with Level Ball, which is amazing. And basically, each has an effect that turns other Stage 1 Pokemon the same type as themselves in addition to their other types. So that means Vaporeon turns your other Stage 1s into water types, as well as whatever they were originally. Jolteon turns them into lightning types, and Flareon turns them into fire types. Pretty straightforward. The advantage here is obviously that, at least in the current metagame, these are all types, well, mainly these two types in particular, are types that there's a fair amount of weakness to on some powerful Pokemon, meaning you can exploit weakness and the doubling damage there for cheap and easy knockouts. And Stage 1s are one prize Pokemon as well, which means obviously that you're not surrendering as many prizes for knockouts as your opponent's liable to be. So all that works together pretty well. Oh, and we're also not going to talk about Golurk in this particular video, although it's worth it to go check him out as he has the ability to turn himself into a psychic and fighting type with his own ability, so he can actually have 5 types if all 3 Eeveelutions are down. But one Pokemon who has definitely been under the radar that these guys can support, which a lot of you are going to be like, what is that? Is Luxio. It's from Flashfire, and it's a card that flew under everybody's radar, including mine, until I kind of was thumbing through cards some time ago. It's an 80 HP Stage 1, and yes, it does have an evolution, but if we take a closer look at it, we find that this is actually a potentially very hard-hitting Pokemon itself. It's got Bite for 1 lightning, and for 2 lightning and a colorless, the attack that really matters is Electric Counter, which is 40 damage times the number of prize cards your opponent has already taken, which that can actually rack up pretty quickly. You can do anywhere from 0 when your opponent's taken no prizes, all the way up to when they've taken 5, all but their last. This guy can actually deal 200 damage, which is pretty impressive for a Pokemon that still has some evolution to go. But think about it for a second in terms of its ability to gain other types and potentially exploit weakness. All of a sudden you're dealing 80 damage for every prize they've taken. That's pretty impressive. It's something that's really made this Pokemon worthy of note, and also 80 and 80 for only 2 prizes is 160, but if you factor in a Muscle Band, now you're dealing 200 damage when they've taken only 2 prizes, which makes that Luxio pretty punishing. Now, while 2 lightning and a colorless is a little bit harder to get together than a lightning and 2 colorless, there are ways around it, which I won't bother to enumerate right now, but anything that drops extra energy around, or you could even go as far as Mega Manectric and so on and so forth, all those things are ways you could get your Luxio to do stuff. And of course, you can level ball it and you can Wally and stuff like that to help power it up, get it onto the board quickly and easily. But there's another way you can power it up that's really worthy of mentioning, that's not so common, and that's Milotic. This Milotic, also from Flashfire, interestingly enough, which is also a Stage 1, interestingly. If you wanted to splash a little water energy, Waterfall with the exploit of weakness could deal some heavy damage. It says once per turn, you may knock out this Pokemon. If you do, attach 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. Meaning that you can actually pick up another prize card for your opponent, which powers up Luxio's Electric Counter, in the process of dropping all 3 energy onto Luxio that you would need to attack. Meaning that you don't even have to attach your energy card for the turn to have Luxio go ahead and swing his full Electric Counter at somebody. And since you just gave them a prize, that's 40 more damage. And if you can exploit their weakness, that's actually 80 more damage that you're going to be dealing. Which is, let's face it, that's a pretty hefty amount of damage for only giving your opponent that 1 prize in that whole exchange. And these Stage 1s are easy to get. Now, I will say this Milotic is not Level Ball compatible, but that's fine because you'll want Ultra Ball to go get those basic energies into your discard pile for Milotic anyway. So that all ends up working out. Now, if you want to enter the world of Expanded, there's another really fun Stage 1 that you can exploit with the Eeveelutions, and that's Chinchino. Chinchino is 90 HP, of course, which is always wonderful, and has the Smooth Coat ability, which makes it so that any damage done to this Pokemon by attacks, well, you get a coin toss, and if heads, they don't do the damage at all. Now, you still take other effects, but that's a lot easier to deal with, meaning you basically have a coin toss chance of taking some horrendous hits from EXs that would otherwise KO you. And this mon can be very good to exploit with weakness, which of course as a colorless it wouldn't get that opportunity, but with the Eeveelutions obviously it does. For 1 energy and basically a double colorless, you do 50 damage, i.e. 100 damage with Echoed Voice, but then on the next turn you deal another 50 base damage, meaning that you deal 50 on turn 1 and then you deal 100 on the next. But if you're exploiting weakness, of course, that turns into 100 on turn 1 and 200 damage on every successive turn for Chinchino, while your opponent has to play the game of, am I going to be able to hit this thing at all through its Smooth Coat? And poison damage from something like Ariados or Hypnotoxic Laser can be very slow to rack up on a 90 HP Pokemon. It might not seem like it, but when you're dealing 200 damage a turn, those turns one by one can be agony for your opponent. Plus, it's 1 energy retreat, means that if you have to retreat out, you certainly can. So just one more very interesting Pokemon you can combo there. But, of course, there's another whole genre of Stage 1s that we haven't touched on yet. And that is fighting types. With things like Strong Energy and Fighting Stadium, fighting types are already known for racking up heavy, heavy damage. And what's especially interesting to note is that if they can exploit weakness, which there aren't too many fighting weak Pokemon out there in common use other than like Mega Manectric and a couple of others, but if they could, say, exploit other weaknesses, they can be especially punishing. Now, some of them are obscure and some of them are less obscure, but 2 ones that are definitely going to potentially fly under your radar. For expanded, if you're feeling exceptionally gutsy, you could try Archeops, who has a first attack for 1 fighting that's 20 damage plus 20 more damage for 2 coin tosses if you can get them right. But of course, more impressively, this free retreating Pokemon with 120 HP, which might get you out of a few attacks, has a 2 energy attack that's just 100 damage. Okay, if he's got 50 HP or less, it actually has base damage of 50, but that's easy to get around. The main thing here we're looking at is the fact that he could deal 200 damage base if he's exploiting weakness, which is pretty impressive. And for the record, if you count his, let's say he is knocked below 50, well, that's still a 50 damage attack. And when you count Strong Energy and Fighting Stadium, let's say you had 1 of each, that's 90. Exploits weakness, that's 180. So he can actually still be a punishing Pokemon, even if his Swift Dive is activated down to lower damage. But in Modified, where this is perhaps a little bit more likely to be used, there's actually Medicham. No, not the double attacking Medicham, as he ignores weakness. But this one is actually not too bad in this format. Yeah, he can Pure Power and put 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like, but that doesn't factor in weakness and resistance, so we can't exploit that. But what we can exploit is that second attack, which with, say, 2 boosts from, say, Fighting Stadium, Muscle Band, Strong Energy, whatever, that's dealing 100 damage with 2 boosts, and then obviously doubling up to 200 for instant knockouts. But even if you aren't scoring instant knockouts, it scores guaranteed confusion, which can be very difficult for your opponent to handle. So, these are just a few of the ways you can exploit these Eon evolutions, and I encourage you to look through all the Stage 1s, and Modified and Expanded, because these Pokemon are very long on ways they can be used. I mean, we haven't even talked about the ability to boost things with Blacksmith, because they'll turn into Fire types with Flareon. And new sets will continue to release new Pokemon, and new cards that interact with these 3 types, allowing for these Pokemon to just get better and better with time. So until next time, like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter if you haven't already. My link is below in the description, and I will see you next time.